All right. Well, thank you for everyone for joining. This is our webinar with SPRY from called Beyond the Note. So I'm Minal. I'm your host. I'm a physical therapist myself. I have been working with SPRY for the past 3 years as a director of clinical solutions. And with me today, I have Jebu, who's also going to be co-hosting with me today, and he is the CTO of SPRY. So before I kind of get into it, Jebu, if you want to go ahead and just quickly introduce yourself, and then we'll get into the presentation.
Sure. Thanks a lot, man. Yeah, I'm the CTO here at SPRY. Been with SPRY for about a little more than a year right now. And yeah, I look at everything tech and been involved in the AI agentic thing for some time now. So I'm glad to see what we're doing here with Scribe.
Thanks, Jebu. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, the purpose of today's webinar, we wanted to be discussing Beyond the Note, how agentic AI is changing documentation for rehab therapy specifically. We're going to be going into the presentation with oh, give me 1 second. There we go. We're going to be covering today with how documentation sort of started in the practice or in the profession, where it's gone and where it's heading next. And then we're going to hear from 3 of our speakers that we have on the call with us today as well. 3 of our partner clinics that have been using the Agentic Scribe and what their experience has been and how things have changed for them and what they're willing to share with us today. And then we're going to get into what comes next. What can we look forward to as we continue this conversation about the Agentic Scribe. So to start with, where is the industry coming from? Where was it and where is it now? We want to talk about, what's reshaping this whole task of documentation. If we're to do that, we must go back, early 1900s if we want to talk about that in terms of how the profession started and what we were doing back then as a physical therapist. It started in field hospitals, rehab therapy, handwritten notes, which, as you can see, lasted for a good 30, 60 plus years until Medicare arrived. And with that came that requirement to, justify care and show the documentation, which became billing proof as well. That lasted about 30 years, and then came the whole Balanced Budget Act and reimbursements, the requirements for how we were going to get paid for what we were doing. And then fast forward into the 2000s when we started seeing EMR mandates and EHR times, tripling because we had to do all this documentation to support why we were doing it for billing, which of course exploded the amount of time that we were spending. And then if you get to today, almost all of us are on some kind of EMR, some kind of EHR documenting. We have scribes available, but on the other end, on the insurance side of things or on the payer side of things, they're also now reviewing at scale, right? They're also now looking at documentation very specifically with their own AI capabilities. So obviously, this, as you can see, has turned into quite a bit of a cognitive load and impact in terms of administrative burden, where 75% of PTs do believe that this is a negative burden on us for patient care. There's all kinds of numbers out there. There's all kinds of studies out there of how this impacts your day to day and as a provider, what that feels like. But just to put it into context again, over 70% of therapists, as noted by the APTA, are reporting high mental fatigue. Over 70% are saying that there's delays in care for their patients because of prior auth requirements, things like that. So obviously, the documentation side of things, and I'm sure, those of you who are on the call right now, as well as our speakers can attest to this, is it's one thing to be burdened as a provider, as a clinician, on what we are doing in, documentation-wise, but it's another thing for it to affect patient care as well. So I think this conversation is also worth having in terms of what documentation really is and what does it do to us as clinicians. Somebody within our SPRY organization had mentioned it's a lonely job, right? Documentation is quite lonely, and what makes it lonely? What is the reason why it is lonely, in the first place? If you think about it, this is happening after or during the time frame when you're now alone. You're no longer engaging with your patient, you're no longer engaging on the floor with your fellow colleagues. You're doing this either at the end of your day or lunchtime or on the weekends, and you're now also required to do context switching. So as a clinician, as a provider, again, I'm sure many of you experience this. You're not only recalling what you did with the patient in that visit, but you're also having to remember compliance. You're also having to remember the clinical reasoning. You're also having to ensure that this output that you're going to get is going to be describing what exactly happened in that session, but then also why therapy is still needed. So along came AI scribes that were meant to help lift that burden for us a little bit, right? Help kind of remove the time context of when this can be done. Oh, we can do it, during session, or oh, we can be, applying it while we are working with our patients. Lots of evidence out there, of course, as you see on the screen here. Lots of evidence out there on scribes, helping to reduce time or helping, alleviate the burden. But I think what's important to note, especially on the rehab therapy side, is the number of scribes that are out there. How many of them are actually at the very kind of bottom of the scale there, helping to really make this not a lonely job anymore, not a lonely sort of experience anymore, because we must, of course, on the rehab side, consider lots of other places within documentation, whether it's the patient's history, 24 visits across, or 30 visits across. What are they presenting like, et cetera. So that part of the scribe journey, and again, many of you who have used scribes probably in your time frame up until now can maybe attest to this in that sense, that there's still sections of having to do documentation outside of your scribe that still take time. On this next screen, I want to pull Jebu into this because, as much as I can talk about on the clinical side, what the experience is as a clinician to be in the clinic using a scribe and working on, documentation with AI. What is the actual, what's under the hood, right? What does it actually mean for me to use something that is agentic versus ambient versus transcription, and what's the purpose for each of them? So Jebu, if you can chime in on this here and give us a little bit of that context.
Sure. I'll bring in a bit of a tech perspective to what we have out here, right? So I'm not a therapist or practitioner myself, right? So that's a bit of a disconnect. So I'm more of a technical guy out here. So from the perspective of how an implementation of a scribe would look like, it's almost evolved along with how AI, ML, machine intelligence has progressed along, right? So the first few versions of what it would be is almost very raw, where you can do a conversion of the text that you're recording into speech itself, right? So a speech into the text itself, and then it would construct a note out of it. So that's pretty rudimentary, where you're converting your voice into a text, and you create a note out of it. You then go ahead and then do the edits. So you have to step in, but it reduces some bit of what the effort you have. The next bit, where you have some bit of intelligence added in. So you have the note which is created from your audio, but then it is able to structure those notes together. It's able to put in some medical terms into it, but it's still very per session basis, right? So the note that you create on an ambient scribe without any more context is just what it is listening and what it's hearing in that particular session itself. Now, with the advance of technology that's happened, when you bring in something like an agentic scribe, what happens is the ability to kind of bring any memory, can bring in context to what is there. And that is what adds the richness to this whole thing, right? It's almost like you have a partner along with you whom you can tell, you can coach, you can give that memory along, and then the note becomes a lot more better. So all of the context gets pulled in, your note becomes a lot more richer, and it can keep acting almost as if it's your assistant, right? So that's what we're going ahead with agentic.
So you're taking away the loneliness, is what you're telling me, huh, Jebu?
That's what we would like to be. So, and then the way to do that is, of course, to get that kind of smartness in place, right? And to get that memory in place and to bring that context in place, it's not easy to do when you're bolting a scribe onto an existing EMR platform, right? So what the scribe and the agentic piece has to have full context of what it's working on, the ability to look into your notes, to look into the patient status, look into what the previous appointments were, look into what the progression has been, especially in for PT when you have long sessions of treatment. So how is it that the progression has been progressing? All of that things need to come in. And we have also introduced something called therapist memory, where you can tell the agent, where you can correct the agent and keep directing towards where you want to go to. That is memory that it keeps and keeps recording. The memory is across from your interaction with the agent as an overall and your interaction with the patient. So these are two different sets of memories that you can bring in. So those two different contexts that we bring in, and overall it gives a very lively feel to the conversation itself.
Beautiful. And I think as the slide indicates here, the tech side of it, of course, helps us solve on the clinical side of it what the experience looks like. So what it does for me as a clinician and what I'm seeing in front of me as I'm documenting, again, not as lonely of a job anymore, where I can interact with that agent and have this complete document or note that keeps in mind all the things that probably were in my head but don't need to be anymore. Wonderful. So I think on to the next act here for us to understand, or for us to actually just get the real life picture of what it is that it feels like on the clinic, on the floor, with real therapists using this kind of technology. And as I mentioned, we have 3 speakers. Our first here is JJ, and he is our physical therapist out of Michigan who works at Orthopedic Physical Therapy Services, and has been, a champion of working with our Scribe Agentic AI and has given us a lot of feedback on it as well. So JJ, if you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself here, and then I'll walk you through the next slides.
Yeah, absolutely. So as she said, I'm JJ. I'm the Director of Orthopedic Physical Therapy Services. So I've been running the clinic here for a little over 10 years now. The clinic's been around for over 20 years. We started looking into switching over to a AI-based scribe program in the last 6 months. Up until then, it was about 10 years of the same situation, same documentation. You see Benny in the slide there too. So that is my dog, Benny. Yes. And I'll mention how he comes into play a little bit too with the scribe, but he's also the clinic dog. So he's here pretty much every day that I am. He's actually taking a nap behind me on the ground right now while we're doing this call. So yeah, we're a smaller clinic. We see mostly post-surgical patients, orthopedic cases. We do mix in some neuro cases, some chronic pain syndromes too. But it's myself, it was originally just a PTA. We kind of grew over time. Now we have 3 therapists. So we're a small clinic. We're not like a big chain with 30, 40 locations. We really take pride in that hands-on, one-on-one time with our patients. We don't want to just run people through cookie cutter treatments, which of course, as kind of was previously mentioned, the problem with spending all that time with your patients is having any time for documentation. So that was just kind of what I always said. The worst part of the job for the last decade or so has been the documentation. So that's the big reason why we started looking to make a change, see if there is a better way to do things.
And JJ, prior to this experience, had you used any other scribes that kind of bolted onto any other products or something just independent?
So I had used a dictation service before. This was about 10 years. This was like when I was just first starting, and I looked into them afterwards. What I didn't like about the dictation services is it usually, back then it took like a day until we actually got the dictated notes back. And then you're proofreading them page by page and making all the edits, the corrections. Nothing was into like a grid format. It was more just like a straight text box, like a paragraph by paragraph written out. So I just didn't feel like the notes were really thorough, and I didn't feel like they saved me much time at that point at all.
Sure. And so, your journey through that kind of technology up until now using Agentic Scribe, as you mentioned, like time is a big factor. The time is one that always gets brought up. It saved me so much time. But what I really want to know, or what I'm interested in really is in that time that is spent, what are you now using that time for? Like, where is that, if it's in the clinic, where is that time being spent now?
So, in the clinic, So I would say in general, I have always pushed notes off till after work in general. Honestly, so I have always kind of gone the route of I have a patient cancel for a half-hour gap in there. In my mind, it's always I'm going to get those notes done then. I'm going to use that gap to actually get some work done. And then something comes up with a patient where either they're having trouble that day or there's more that I want to look into. And I find myself spending like a full hour and a half with one patient, and there goes the note time again. So I'd say in general with the like decreased time for documentation, where that time's gone is more so just time outside of work where I'm not constantly dictating. I'm not staying at the office till like 8, 9 p.m. So that, and then with being able to dictate, especially the daily notes, what I found now I like to do is on lunch. That's where I mentioned Benny would come back around. I actually take him for a walk and I'll just dictate the notes while I go for the walk there on the app on my phone. And then when I come back in, I'll kind of double check them all and see how they turned out. But it does allow me, instead of sitting at a computer, to at least get out of the clinic for a little bit there.
That's fantastic. Again, another way to not be lonely, right? The dog gets
Yes.
the dog has the human with them, and the human has the dog with them, and still,
Mhm.
you know, in the background things are getting done. That's amazing. That's great.
Yeah.
So in terms
Absolutely.
of also, you know, the rest of your colleagues in your clinic,
Mhm.
what have you seen in terms of adoption for them as well? I know you had kind of been the one starting off using it, and then kind of the rest of them did. So how has that been for them?
Yeah, so we have the 3 therapists who treat here. I am definitely the one who has been the most forward with jumping all in with the AI, with using the agent in particular, teaching it my preferences, our rules. The other 2 therapists have definitely found use in the AI aspect of it, but I think are a little more hesitant to make major changes, especially if they don't feel like it's necessary at the time, where I think they've gotten the most benefit is performing their subjectives. So being able to turn on the microphone while they're doing either their evaluation or their progress note, just to get the subjective portion from the patient's point of view and having that automatically input. They prefer measurement wise to still manually input their measurements in. And then based on the measurements, the subjective of the patient, they'll use the scribe somewhat for their assessment writing, but I think they're still more so doing it manually at this point, which I get. I think it's one of those things where, since we are still kind of in the earlier phases of using the agent, using the AI, there's still some growing pains in there. So I think they are more so waiting until like everything is perfect, and then probably we'll jump in a little bit more rather than going through some of those growing pains as well.
Makes sense. Absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest things I want to point out here as well, and why I asked you that question, I think, is because everyone's adoption level is going to be unique in the sense of, you know, what stage they're going to kind of be working in. I think somebody like you was very forward thinking and seeing kind of the light at that end of the tunnel and what it can do for you. You've been, pretty hands-on with this technology to give us that feedback. So having used, our scribe and now our agentic scribe, give me maybe like 2 big pointers that you've noticed that helps kind of close the gaps from what it was like before till now in terms of your documentation.
Yeah, I would say the agent in particular, I think, has really pushed things forward quite a bit. Just the ability to, I actually spend a little time, kind of like if anyone who's used AI before, I used like ChatGPT to kind of teach it. It's almost a back and forth conversation. I've even found myself asking the agent, like, hey, is there a way we can do this a little more concisely? Is there a way I can make sure these grids get pulled up correctly? And the agent will come up with an idea of like, here's a like rule we can throw in. This is what it's going to change. And I'll kind of have a back and forth with the whole, well, if we add that, is it going to be a problem with this? So I think taking the time to initially play around with it and put that extra time in will save you a lot of time in the future to get things the proper way, exactly how you want them to be early on, rather than just trying to react or just getting annoyed with it and saying, well, it's not doing the notes the way I want them to. Let's just move on. I give up on this. So it is like put the time in early will make it a much smoother process later on. And even with that, like we're still tinkering with things here. Like I just changed up how it writes our subjectives going forward just this last weekend, and now we're playing around with like the billing aspect of it too. So I would say that's my top pointer is you do have to spend a little time with it. It's going to be a transition. I mean, it's like when notes went from paper to electronic. There was a transition period. Not everyone loved it initially. It took some time. But at the end of the day, it's going to save you a ton of time once you get there.
Really appreciate that feedback, JJ. Appreciate your time, giving us that all along the transition of, getting Agentic up and running, but then also, kind of keeping up with it and being on the webinar today. So appreciate it.
Minal, one quick question, if I may, to JJ. You mentioned, JJ, that you do the dictation while you're out on a walk. So you do that with the app that SPRY gives you?
Yes, yeah, I do that with the app there. I use the app for all of the follow-up notes, the daily notes. I find it's quicker in and out of each of the dictation sections than doing it on a computer. But I do still do our evaluations and progress notes all off the computer.
Wonderful.
All right. And so now next we've got Dr. Aluvathingal from CAM Physical Therapy out in Maryland. So Dr. Anu, I'm going to pass it over to you if you want to do a little bit of an introduction and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Great. Thank you, Minal. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Aluvathingal. I'm a physical therapist and I'm clinic director at CAM Physical Therapy, like Minal mentioned. We are located in Maryland. We have 6 clinics across Maryland. We are primarily we are bilingual supported clinic. So we do, we have Spanish speaking staff around. So for patients who needed Spanish, who are Spanish speakers, we have staff on site to assist with translation. For patient case-wise, we do orthopedic, sports rehab, we accept workers' comp cases. We also have occupational therapy, and we also do industrial rehab in CAM services. And CAM has been around since 2003, so we've been up in for over 20 years in business. And again, very patient-centered, individualized care, providing with manual emphasis in our treatment. So finally, we made the switch last summer in June, and we have been very happy, not only upcoming to becoming live. Before that, even the onboarding process, we were very impressed with the assistance we got from SPRY, because there's certain ways that CAM would do their documentation beforehand, and SPRY took the time to understand what is required in our documentation, what are our these things must be in our documentation. So before we went live, we had that whole processes with different leaders from SPRY being in this process, and we were able to go live in June, and still very, very impressed and grateful about their customer service. And now moving on as a clinician, the Agentic Scribe has helped definitely, I should say, reduce a lot of back and forth during our evaluations and the treatment sessions. The mental burden of okay, now I have to remember these values, but no, now I have a scribe there, recording what I'm doing with the patient. So as a clinician, the whole process of transitioning to SPRY and utilizing Scribe has helped me have more interaction with the patient and use my time be with patients rather than typing away during my treatment times. Yep.
Thank you, Dr. Anu. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways that I took from your feedback to us was, this idea that you were now experiencing with that time that you were saving with your documentation, that you were present and in person with your patient in front of you, making eye contact. And I think, again, that goes back to some of maybe what we talked about earlier about, what therapy used to be like, what we were doing before when we were just literally, undivided presence, undivided attention with our patients, there, present. And then again, down the line, as we continue to have to do more and more, add to our cognitive load, that got taken away from us. So if you can, give me a little bit more sort of experience from your patient lens, if that's changed at all, if you've noticed anything from your patient side of, view in terms of maybe what they might be experiencing now that you are feeling more present with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, like right now, like when we go in with an evaluation, like I said, um, the whole sense of burden as a clinician approaching an eval has changed significantly. Now I am going in with a companion, that's the scribe. Like I would like to use like, when we have students, sometimes when we are training them, I would bring a student in with me and I would get so excited because now I can actually do what I need to do with my patient and the student is there and they will be my scribe. Right. So, and then the student's rotation gets done, and I'm like sad. I'm like, now I have to do this all by myself again,
Right.
But now that same excitement of someone being there to assist in this process of documentation. So I'm not focused on the documentation or typing, I'm actually listening to the patient. And, Scribe is recording things and not just recording. I just want to say like the detail that they capture, the thoroughness of a documentation needs to be commended. And I've had patients like, even though like when I start an evaluation, I like to get their consent that the session will be recorded for documentation purposes. And then I am putting the computer aside and literally looking at the patient, and having the conversation, getting their history, proceeding with my assessment and evaluation. And I've had patients who'd be like, are you going to remember all of this? Like, are you going to remember all of this? And I'm like, well, I have a friend here, So that like they are like, I guess that they say like this is something that we haven't seen from healthcare providers, having to have that eye contact. You're literally looking at it like you noticed this, nobody else have noticed it so far. That kind of feedback, we have definitely gotten it. And generally like being the efficiency, talking about the efficiency of it, I could be doing manual treatment with patients and I will turn the scribe on and the scribe will be just chilling by the side and I could be asking like the subjective examination can be done. And that helped me kind of, better manage the time that I have. And we run on a 30-minute, daily treatment sessions and the initial evaluations are an hour. So how to, maximize the time that I have patients along with utilizing the scribe has been phenomenal for us.
Great. Yeah, I think it's always nice to hear about the patient's experience as much as it matters as a clinician. Obviously, the product is the clinician and the patient. So that interaction and that experience is very useful as well. Thank you for that. I think another thing that you had mentioned, and this was something you had recorded for us a little while ago, was, which I found really, actually quite heartwarming to hear, was this feeling that you were now getting where you no longer had the cognitive burden to have to kind of context switch with language as well, English being your second language. That previously was sort of maybe a kind of a friction point for you as you were documenting, and that experience now has changed for you. If you could give me a little, and the people on the webinar, a little bit of context around that too.
If
Yeah,
I may
so
add
like,
on, Minal, there was a question in the Q&A about how it's been dealing with patients in Spanish. So if you could also add to that, that'd be great.
Perfect, yes.
I think Scribe also knows Spanish to some extent because like when I do it, they do also like try to catch up with the, Spanish translation. But like I said, CAM is also bilingual practice. So when they come, like we do have our staff present in the room. So Scribe keeps up with the translation and there's nothing short in the outcome of the report that we have. And I can see even when the patient responds in Spanish, sometimes it automatically like translates it before the actual translation takes place by the staff member. And going back to your original question, Minal, yes, English is not my first language. So when I approach an evaluation and you start and you try to get the history of the patient and they are going 30 years back and I'm already in my brain, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is about to be a long eval. It's going to probably go until my, nighttime the next day, probably kind of having to summarize, finding the right words or phrases to still manage to input what I think is important. Like I feel like I'm like an OCD typer person. I'm like, I need to include all the details possible. Like that's what my mindset is like or was like. And so initially when we, transitioned over to SPRY, that letting go was hard. I'm like, okay, no, I can't completely trust Scribe. Like, they wouldn't capture. But then I took the time to sit and read what Scribe is populating, and with Agentic Scribe even better. Like I will look at the summary and I'm like, as a clinician, is there any more details that I needed to provide this patient the best care that they deserve? And that summarizing where I don't have to worry about, what is a correct word, adjective, pronoun, whatever I needed to use for this. Scribe is doing all that, and it is doing it in a comprehensive, yes, condensed form, and it is very thorough. So like I could see, like I usually ask for feedback from my PTA, like, is there like anything that you noticed that from my note that was missing that would have affected, like you would have, treated this patient any differently? Like, is there any details that was missing? And like, so far I have not gotten any. Like the thoroughness of the documentation has been very good. And for someone who, speaks a different language, that was a big help for me. And that mental burden has become significantly less in completing an evaluation. And with the whole summarizing of a lengthy history, Scribe has been the best companion on that.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Anu. I think it's very useful again to know different aspects. Right now, every clinician has this exact English as a second language, but obviously many do, and this would be very interesting for those for sure. Appreciate it. All right, so next we have Dr. Chris from DPT Physical Therapy out in Michigan. And so go ahead, Chris, if you can go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your organization, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, it's like JJ, I'm from Michigan. I'm on DPT Physical Therapy and Fitness. And so I opened up in 2017 with a mission to kind of treat, one-on-one outside of like the big chain mill model. And when I first chose an EMR, I wanted something that had everything. So the EMR that chose had billing and scheduling and everything involved into it in one. And they made some promises down the road, like, hey, we're going to get a little more tech savvy and different things. And it looked like my EMR system was from 1998. And as the time gone on, we just wanted to have more tech features. So Minal, you could probably test this. I think I was one of the earlier users of SPRY. And so I get to see it grow essentially. And so when I first joined on, the Scribe wasn't even there. And so now we've got the Agentic Scribe, which is really cool to see. And so, SPRY has been a game changer for my practice, trying to treat just like JJ's as well in a one-on-one model inside of insurance space is a challenge now in today's world. So the fact that we have a teammate like SPRY is something that's really nice and allows us to treat in the way that we want to. It allows us as therapists to have a breath of fresh air and have a little bit of help. Also, as a clinic owner, it gets to give me a chance to kind of free up some time for some admin work as well. So I've got 2 locations in Metro Detroit, one in Berkeley and one in Bloomfield. And like I said, we orthopedic and sports, as well as just kind of general treatment as well. So it's been really cool to see the progress with SPRY, and the Agentic Scribe has been a game changer for us in the time being, and looking to see how we can implement it more.
Wonderful. I think from your lens, especially as the the owner and practicing clinician, I think it'd be really useful for us to understand from your lens that what is it that you've seen as at the owner level for the practice with technology like Scribe? Are the rest of your therapists experiencing something that you never thought they would have using such a technology? Are you seeing at the payer level certain changes happening as well for your documentation? So anything that you can give us from that owner's perspective would be helpful as well.
Yeah, having the ability to just using Scribe and allowing you to get all your thoughts, that you're talking about in a session or an evaluation on paper in your note gives us the ability to justify, being more versatile with our coding, essentially. So we can use different coding and we say, hey, listen, we're justifying our actions because we're using NMR versus everything being, a 3-unit Therax and 1-unit manual, like I'm pretty sure everyone used to do back in the day. We've been able to diversify our codes a little bit, which has helped for our billing and reimbursement. On the other side of technology, it's allowed for myself to, I can get an evaluation note done in, with this Scribe now, I'm getting it done less than 10 minutes. That frees me up to then go ahead and work on some admin stuff, give me some time for marketing at an ownership level. And then also just, giving more time to kind of grow the clinic and the practice that I feel like in ways that we need to. So having the ability, and Anu mentioned it, kind of having a teammate when you're doing your sessions to have, like a student that's just documenting for you. We're super time efficient. We're getting stuff done. So at the owner level, the ability to give back time and also reduce that burnout of I've got to go home with 20 notes for the day. I've got 2 young kids, so I want to go home and spend some more time with them and not have to sit down on a computer, in the time that I have. So I get to go home and as an owner, sometimes you don't get to shut off, and as a clinic director as well, but I get to shut off a little bit because some of my stuff is done and I get to kind of spend some time with the family, but also work on some other stuff for the business and the clinic as well. So been a game changer for us.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's the sort of the angle that I wanted to make sure people understood for as an owner level, that it frees you up for, how else you're going to expand your business, how else are you going to offer, things to your clients that are going to continue to make your business grow. So appreciate it. Thank you very much, Chris, for your input there as well. As everyone can see from what we talked about with with our partners here, these 3 clinics, very different sizes, different specialties, but pretty much the same story. They adopted it, they applied it not just to evals, but also follow-ups, and then they, ensured that their documentation was going to be utilized as kind of a revenue infrastructure there to make sure that, again, down the line, it all kind of closes the loop. Well, I think what nobody expected really was that the therapists were going to be more present. To some degree, we expected it, but I think this, experience has shown much more depth in that as well. So moving on to the next era, the Agentic Scribe. What is to be expected to be upcoming? For this, I'm going to go ahead and head it out to Jebu to give us a little bit more of like the technical side of it, and then also I'll talk about a little bit on the clinical side of it as well.
Sure. So yeah, as we have seen, right? So it brings a lot of difference of how when you have the ability to have context and the ability to have the memory and the ability to have that artificial intelligence applied with all of these things together to kind of give you a whole persona along with you, right? So that's what Agentic Scribe gives you. And the way it built is with these 6 kind of core principles, which is there. So the ability to understand the note. So because we have built it on top of our the model that we have in the data that the structured data that we store, it gives the ability to deeply understand what is the data we stored in there in terms of the grids or the goal list or whatever is it that you might be storing in the note. The ability to understand that to the finest point which is there, it gives the agent that ability to give that understanding of the data, right? Then the ability to look back into it. So looking your the past visits that is there with the patient across other the patients that you've treated. So both the therapist as well as the patient memory, which is there. And you instruct it once, you give it pointers once, it keeps a note of what it is, right? So the ability to store that the instructions that you give, that distinguishes it. And things like when you ask it to correct something and you ask it to go and say that change, for example, a measurement which is there from some value, something else, it like change the left shoulder to right throughout, right? That's the example that's shown there. It goes ahead and changes it across the board. You don't have to go and say each specific section, how to go into it, because it understands the note. It's almost like what Dr. Anna was saying, that it's like your assistant or your student which is there. So because you're just telling it to go and do it. The other thing that we built in is kind of a compliance, which is the ability to kind of do the checks which is there into it. So flag the problems before you sign off. So running compliance checks, making sure it's compliant with the guidelines, which is that's all things we built into it. And because this documentation goes directly into your claim, the claim becomes a lot more cleaner, and you don't have to spend as much time as possible probably to kind of make sure that the notes are as good to go, right? So that's about it. And this is kind of an overall pictorial representation, if you may, to kind of give you a thing as you go away to kind of keep what is it that the Agentic Scribe is built on top of. The data layer, which accumulates a lot of what the core data sections are, the context and the reasoning portions, which comes in a lot with the advances that's been happening in there, and the ability to do a turn-by-turn interaction with the AI and the agentic layer, which is there, right? So that then feeds into the billing piece, the notes which is constructed, all of that stuff which goes in. So this is what the whole Agentic Scribe is now about.
Great, thank you for that, Jebu. I think on the clinical side, what I can explain in terms of the agentic AI with Agentic Scribe with SPRY is this experience that it's all immersed, right? So it's not bolted on. It's an app that is completely within your documentation flow. Before the visit, the system already knows your patient. During the visit, you're recording the session and it's listening in. Whether you do it during session or after session, it'll complete that note for you. And then if anything is needed in terms of any changes, you have that available screen right there for you to enter and update and change anything that you might want to. And then pushes into, once you've completed your SOAP, pushes into that billing side of things. So it's fluid, it's not disjointed, it's not layered sort of on the sort of bolted on side of things. And so, again, going back to how the system was built, as it says down here at the bottom, the systems that win will treat the documentation as structured data, real-time validation, revenue, but it's all built on this layer of ability to actually do this, right? So this is why we were able to do what we do with the Agentic Scribe. Great. So that was our piece of, side of things where we were going to talk about all things that we wanted to talk about. And now let's open it up to you all. So just to close it out, again, the node has a new job now. We started by talking about what PT is built on, undivided presence, right there and then with your patient. And that's what we're trying to get back to. So if you'd like a demo of it, go ahead and use this QR code. If you want to see it in your workflow, again, use that QR code. But I want to open it up to questions. I want to open it up to the floor that might have questions for us to answer. So we've got, has it been rolled out yet or just with beta? So that's a great question. So at the moment, we have had it in beta testing for a little bit of time now, and we are working on rollout very quickly. And so maybe Jebu, you might have a little bit more context around that for rollout to our rest of our providers.
Yeah, we're slowly rolling it out. So today is a public launch of the Scribe Agentic Scribe piece, right? So we are slowly rolling it out, and it should be reaching you very shortly.
I think this is another question that I think maybe you can answer here, Jebu, about the diarize to the patient and clinician. She says, I assume it doesn't work well for our clients in the neuro or SLP office who have dysarthria that have difficulty speaking maybe. So you have some input on that side.
The diaries, I'm guessing it is how do we separate the speakers there, right? The provider versus the patient. Is that the question? Which is that?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, we do distinguish between the participants. So we have the ability to kind of we won't be able to tag as to who's who, but from the context, it's then able to pick up. The agent can then pick up whether it's the patient or the clinician, which is that. So yes, it is diarized, which is that. The second portion of how well we're able to pick up for speech and speech disorder, I'm guessing we'll have to see when you are using it in the field, and we will keep improving it as we get those results.
There's another question here. It says, is it recommended to keep the Scribe open for the entirety of the treatment session? I'll give my clinical side, I think, and then Jebu, if you want to chime in as well. The answer to me is yes, because it can then get more context about what it is that you are working with that patient or what you'd like to have included with that session. So the more it knows about what you're doing in that moment, the better output it can get. As a clinician,
to piggyback off that, Minal, we to answer someone, I think it might have been Tyler. We do actually wear lapel mics in our clinic now, so I can leave my computer somewhere else instead of dragging along me in the session, and I just keep on the mic and my computer open the entire session. And then once I finish the session, hit close on that, push it to the note, and ready for the next one.
Jebu, any input on that in terms of how much we should allow it to be recording and what?
I guess the more information, the better. So the more context that we have, the better. But we have seen people use it in both options where you are listening in to the entire conversation. There are other situations we've seen where you use it with as a dictation kind of a thing after the conversation is done. But the better would be if it is on during the conversation, because it captures a lot more context in that case.
Yeah, and I think Trina, you had asked the question about best way to ensure that it's not capturing neighboring conversations, etc. Yeah, the lapel mic would certainly be helpful to be able to capture what's being discussed in that vicinity. Kevin has a question around, can the agent itself keep track of the reminders for that patient? Let's say we want to send for an MRI after 3 weeks.
That's something that we're working on. We're building it in there. So those are things that how to make it even more assistant-like. Those are things that we're working on.
And then another one was, how does it work with seeing multiple patients at once? Again, on the clinical side, I could say, you'd have your documentation, SOAP notes screen open for one patient you're recording. That session will be recorded against that screen. You'd have to pause or stop if you want to be recording another clinical conversation that you might be having in another window. But you can have as many windows as you want open, for each of the patients and a scribe open. It's just a matter of pausing it and then going into the next one to record.
Yeah, I don't know if it's in the context of group sessions, which is there. So if that's the case, that might be another use case which is there. We will still be able to diarize between the various participants. But again, adding the thing of when you have more than one participant in place, who that exact voice belongs to is something that we have still not been able to do that. So once you're able to tag it, and if you can tell the agent that this is this particular participant, it then has a context, and then we can then get that going. But that's something that we have not done yet. So that's something we'll be looking at building in.
Yeah, so if there's more than one patient in that visit, that's how it will account for. Anu has a question, what's the data retention policy for AI Scribe? So Jebu, I believe we have on the HIPAA side of things, we have a policy of what we're storing and what we're not. And
yeah, the raw conversation itself is stored for a minimal amount of time. It's about 4 to 5 days that the raw conversation itself is stored, and after that we take it off.
Can the agent auto track range of motion and MMT progression across visits, or do you still link that to goals manually? No, so this is what the patient history side of things comes in. So it will be able to give you the context and feedback on, okay, if you ask it what was the range of motion on visit 2 versus what is it now, it can go back and sort of look at that whole historical context and give you that information in that chat option, chat kind of box or screen. And then of course you can always add it to your documentation as you wish as well. But you can certainly see the progress over that patient's visit and get the historical context of the patient visits as well. Albin has, does it work on top of a current EMR system? We currently use Athena as that, and does it work on top of another EMR system?
Currently, it's bolted on to the SPRY EMR system itself, which is why we are able to build a lot of these things. So no, it doesn't work outside on another EMR system. So that another question that I see, Minal, is how the conversation with the patient, the AI knows what not to include, the extra information. Again, that's something that we are able to detect as to what is the pleasantries that you exchange versus what is the actual medical information which is there. So it's only the medical information which is relevant to the visit itself that the agent then extracts and then puts it into the note. It excludes all the non-relevant information out, medical relevant information out. It's not pulled there.
Katie, I see that you've asked as well, can you turn off the notes that have poor recognition for your ALS clinic? So absolutely, you can decide to turn it on or turn it off, the use of your Agentic Scribe, it's a literal press record or not. You can also partially record. So if you want to just record your subjective questionnaire or your objective, you can do that as well. So if you feel like you don't want to record the whole session, oftentimes you also maybe don't even want to say certain things out loud in front of your patients. There's certain sort of, medical things that you want to just maybe add into the actual transcription without having to say them out loud, which also you have the option to do, just to be able to type it in as well. Does it document the exercises done each visit based on the verbal instructions given to the patient during the session? So that I believe, and Jebu, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, we are moving towards on that plan side of things to be able to also provide the exercise descriptions on that as well.
Yeah, okay. Planning is currently, we went live with planning in the beta version today. So yes, we do have support for that today.
Yeah, so Jennifer also said, highlight the part that the scribe has 2 options. Yes, there's a conversation with the patient that you can record back and forth, but there also is just dictation. So if you wanted to not record your session with the patient, you can just dictate, say, what you need to say out loud. And then there is, again, if I go back onto the how it's built, your scribe knows your forms. It knows what fields you have in your documentation forms. And as Anu mentioned a while back, every clinic could have very unique forms, very unique fields that they want to make sure are available for the providers to be documenting in. So given that your scribe knows that structure of the form, it fills in where you have fields. And if you don't have them, as Jennifer's mentioned here as well, there's extra information section that you can go ahead and put into the note if you want to add it into the note at that time. Anu has asked if we have an interpreter in the session who is doing live translation, how does scribe handle that? I believe, Jebu, I might have actually sent this to our scribe team as a question a little while ago as well. Somebody had asked the same. If they've got interpreter, patient, and clinician in the visit, again, how would that be handled?
Yeah, so it comes in like a regular conversation itself, right? So it doesn't make any difference. So we will be able to, if like Dr. Anna was saying, that Spanish is something that we're able to pick up. If it's a language we're not able to pick up, then the presence of an interpreter, we'll be able to pick that up, the interpreted version in there, and then do the conversation recognition on top of that. But otherwise, it's no difference. It will work in either scenario.
And I can attest to that, Minal. Like, there's, patient cases where like patient will come, their family member will be present. So there's multiple people in that treatment room who's conversating during the process of an evaluation. And like, scribe is like a fly on the wall, they're present. But at the end of the day, when we apply generate the review, it is still picking up what is pertinent for that patient's clinical presentation and what we are treating them for, and like omitting data that is not applicable for what we are treating. So regardless if it is a session that needs interpretation services for Spanish or any reason, they actually do a nice part on like just a regular session versus there's just patient and PT versus multiple people included. The report actually comes out very clean and thorough with only the details that is needed for the patient there. No extra step needed besides turning on the scribe.
Thank you for that, Anu. We've got another question from Lane. How are clinicians recording the exercises presently? Do they have a paper flow sheet or then add it to the note? So in SPRY, as an EMR itself or EHR itself, we've got several different methods you can use to add exercises. We've integrated with a program called Wibby that you can fill in the exercises directly into your flow sheets in SPRY. You can manually type them in if you want to as well. You have macro icons and things like that you can use. So currently, while Scribe is not, selecting those exercises for you or adding them in for you, there are several automated ways to do that as well.
Yeah, I was going to add to that. Like, we are definitely a clinic that we still use the paper flow sheets for our exercises. I don't really see us going away from that. But on my end, what I tend to do is I'll add in the exercises afterwards. That said, the planning aspect of the Scribe agent, that I think just got pushed for the beta on Monday. So I just started playing around with that the last couple of days, giving it an exercise, having it add in there. I've already been trying to teach it how many minutes to expect for each exercise as well. It's picking up that pretty quickly as well. So I think it is a system that you can be as advanced as you want, or you can still stick with kind of the old-fashioned paper charts and make it work for you too.
There's a question around like how will it be sort of enabled in SPRY from the current Scribe that you had to the Agentic. Jebu, if you want to give us a little sort of information on that in terms of how we'll be turning it on for the rest of the users.
Yeah, so if you're already on SPRY, if you want to try it out, please let us know. Reach out to us on the Slack channels that you have with the support folks, and we will get it enabled for you. Happy to have you on beta panel and then try it out. We'll slowly be rolling it out, but if you want to get in ahead of the others, please let us know, and we'll be happy to get you in.
I think Jennifer has mentioned that the SPRY app. So we got for the app for clinicians that is available. That's an app that you can record, as JJ has been, your Scribe conversations or dictations. And as she's mentioned, that it's been a game changer for those therapists that are going into mobile settings, going into the patient's home, not having to take their laptops with them, not having to take any other devices besides just their phone, record the conversation, and then get back onto your EMR, which is through your laptop or any device, iPad, even if you're using a tablet or something, and go ahead and push it to the SOAP note from there. Currently, you don't push through the SOAP note from the phone, but you can on any of your EMR devices.
JD, I had a question on, is it available as a free trial, a free service for student clinicians? Do we know what the plans are there?
Currently, I don't believe it is, but we can certainly, go ahead and look into options for that for sure. It's a great point to bring up, for especially being, one of the first agentic scribes out there. If we can have some sort of a version for people to try out.
We'll take that as feedback and see how we can get some sort of free trial enabled for student clinicians. That's something that we'll take that as feedback.
Last 2 minutes. I'm getting a flag for last 2 minutes. We can just let customers say one line each.
Yeah. So I'd say, okay. Overall takeaway. I've already seen it grow leaps and bounds in the last 5 months. We're at the point where it's starting to save time. I know, give it another year or so, it's going to save more and more. So trying to get ahead of things early, and excited to see where it goes from here.
Yes, so SPRY definitely a work in progress, but I see hope that this can actually definitely make our days more efficient and decrease our mental burden. And I hope this is another big feature that we can attract more professionals to join physical therapy as a profession without thinking of documentation as something that they will consider as a reason to step back from. Because sometimes when I attend career fairs, that's one of the questions that I get, and I'm like, man, yes, I do document at home during the weekend, and they're like, oh man, how's your work-life balance? But I see hope that with this, I can proudly say, yes, this is the best profession that you can enter, along with a scribe acting like a companion to let that happen and have the best job doing the best for our patients.
Yeah, for myself, I think it's like I mentioned before. I mentioned before, I think just having time, right? It just takes away the burden of documenting and having that just linger over your head in the clinic and at home. So giving the time and preventing that burnout that, all PTs know and are aware of and see, I think it's going to be a big part of preventing that burnout and allowing clinics, kind of like ours, to treat the way we want to treat and to actually spend time with our patients.
Wonderful. Thank you all for joining. Really appreciate your
Thanks
feedback.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Jebu.